an unexpected threat to the U.S. energy system. Journalist John McLeon writes in an op-ed in the Epoch Times, an unexpected threat to the U.S. energy system could plunge the country into darkness, and one such threat to the winter is electric cars. The same electric cars that, according to White House newsletters, will propel America into a better future, drive China out of the auto market, and win the battle against climate change. A year ago, the Biden announced the administration's intention to make half of the new cars sold in 2030 zero-emission vehicles, meaning battery electric cars, hybrid electric cars, or fuel cell electric cars. Sleepy Joe has not stopped promoting electric cars even today. Quote, if your house gets struck by lightning and all the power goes out, you can plug your house into an electric car, end quote, says the American president, not realizing that an electric car will probably be the lightning bolt that shuts down the power grid. There are 2.5 million electric cars in the U.S., and 80% of owners prefer to charge their cars at night. This puts a significant burden on the power grid, experts say. By 2025, there will be 20 million electric cars on U.S. roads, not 2.5. By 2030, more than half the cars sold will be electric, and then 5.4 gigawatts of energy will be needed to charge electric cars. A nuclear power plant produces 1 gigawatt of energy. Can renewables fill that gap? In the summer of 2022, the world realized that no, it can't. Quote, the reality is that the electricity system is old and much of the infrastructure was built before we started thinking about climate change, end quote, says Romani Webb of Columbia University's Sabin Center. It was not designed to withstand the effects of climate change, he said. In order to decide where to invest the money, and in a way that earns its owners, they take into account the average data of the past, not the gloomy climate forecasts, and this makes the network vulnerable. For example, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, said the state's power grid is summer ready and has enough capacity for normal summer conditions based on average weather conditions from 2006 to 2020. However, in the summer of 2022, 6 power plants in Texas were damaged due to extreme heat. Residents were asked to limit electricity consumption, keep thermostats at or above 25 degrees Celsius, and avoid using energy-intensive appliances during peak hours. The supply and demand problem in the U.S. energy system was exacerbated by the drought. Due to dams producing electricity, there was a loss of 2% of reliable hydropower. Add to this the rapid decommissioning of many coal-fired power plants, when almost everything from toothbrushes to cars is electrified, and now electric cars are also on the list of electricity consumers. What if, say, the electric grid fails in electric car crazy California? Given California's desire to increase sales of electric cars, the next test of the viability of the electricity grid could end in disaster. In the U.S., there are 21 electric cars per public charging port. To keep up with the plan to increase electric car sales, the U.S. needs to install about 500 charging ports every day for the next 8 years, and then in 2030, every electric car will have one, possibly. There is a famous story in America about how Moshe Cohen, CEO of financial startup Gravity, decided to start his electric taxi company and approached large parking lots and operators to install 50 fast chargers that can charge a car in 20 minutes, consuming huge amounts of electricity. And here's what derailed the project. If you connect 50 cars to 50 chargers at the same time while the cars are charging, the equipment will consume as much electricity as a high-rise office building. We're facing some very serious limitations, admitted Moshe Cohen. This is much the same with all high technology. Equipment is easier to build than to power, and the power set. Now, even if the United States, however, manages to install enough charging ports, the American electricity grid is not strong enough to meet the needs of all electric cars. Experts say America's power grid is on its last legs. The electric power grid, writes Masoon Amin, a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Minnesota. He says, supports our economy, our quality of life, our society, and that grid simply cannot survive technological change, especially if you do what is expected, cut nuclear power from 20% of national power generation in 2019 to 12% in 2050, as the U.S. Energy Information Administration plans. It's much easier to reduce wind and solar generation than to shut down a coal-fired or hydroelectric plant, so green energy is first in line for cuts no matter what its apologists say. And this was from Fond SK, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.